The Colorado winter of 1887 showed no mercy. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets across the Rocky Mountain wilderness, turning familiar trails into treacherous mazes of white. The wind howled through the pine trees like a banshee, carrying with it the promise of death for any soul caught unprepared in its icy embrace. Thomas and Margaret Whitmore had been traveling with their 3 children from Denver to their new homestead near Leadville when the storm struck with unprecedented fury. Their sturdy wagon, loaded with all their earthly possessions, had been their sanctuary until the moment a lightning bolt split an ancient oak tree, sending it crashing down directly into their path. "Papa!" 12-year-old Lucy screamed as the massive trunk crushed the front of the wagon, killing both parents instantly. The horses, terrified and wounded, broke free from their harnesses and disappeared into the white void of the blizzard. Lucy, with her auburn hair now matted with snow and tears, pulled her younger siblings from the wreckage. 9-year-old Samuel, his face pale with shock, clutched his broken arm against his chest. Little Emma, only 5 years old, sobbed uncontrollably, her small body shaking from both cold and terror. "Lucy, where's Mama?" Emma's voice was barely audible above the wind. "Why won't Papa wake up?" Lucy's heart shattered, but she knew she had to be strong. She was the oldest now, the only one who could keep them alive. They're sleeping, Emma. We need to find shelter." For 3 days the children wandered through the unforgiving wilderness. Lucy rationed the few biscuits she'd salvaged from the wagon, giving most to Samuel and Emma while her own stomach gnawed with hunger. They slept huddled together under a torn canvas tarp, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Samuel's arm had swollen badly and he could barely walk. Emma had stopped crying, which frightened Lucy more than her tears ever could. The little girl's lips were turning blue, and her eyes held a distant look that spoke of a child retreating deep within herself to escape an unbearable reality. On the 4th night, as they sheltered beneath a rocky overhang, Lucy heard them, the low, haunting howls of wolves echoing through the mountains. The pack was close, too close. She could see their yellow eyes glinting in the darkness beyond their meager fire. "Samuel, stay awake," she whispered urgently, shaking her brother's shoulder. "We need to keep the fire going." But Samuel was burning with fever, delirious from his infected arm. Emma lay motionless in Lucy's arms, her breathing shallow and labored. As the wolves crept closer, their dark shapes moving like shadows between the trees, Lucy closed her eyes and prayed to a God who seemed to have abandoned them in this frozen hell. She thought of her parents, of the warm kitchen back in Denver, of bedtime stories and Sunday morning pancakes, all gone forever. The lead wolf, a massive gray beast with scars across its muzzle, stepped into the firelight. Its lips curled back, revealing razor-sharp fangs. Lucy clutched a burning branch from the fire, her hands trembling not just from cold but from the terrible knowledge that she was about to watch her siblings die. "Stay back," she screamed, waving the makeshift torch. "Stay back." The wolf crouched, muscles coiled like springs ready to leap. In that moment, Lucy understood that her short life was about to end in this desolate place, far from civilization, far from anyone who might remember their names. But sometimes, in the darkest moments, when hope seems nothing more than a cruel joke, the mountains themselves conspire to write a different ending. The gunshot cracked through the night like thunder, echoing off the canyon walls. The lead wolf yelped and stumbled backward, a warning shot having grazed its ear. The pack scattered into the darkness as quickly as they had appeared, leaving only the acrid smell of gunpowder and the children's ragged breathing. From the shadows emerged a figure that seemed carved from the mountain itself, tall, broad-shouldered, with weathered hands that gripped a Winchester rifle with practiced ease. Josh Ironheart stood 6 feet tall, his dark hair streaked with premature gray, his face bearing the deep lines of a man who had seen too much sorrow. His piercing blue eyes, cold as winter ice, surveyed the scene before him. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath, taking in the sight of the 3 children huddled around their dying fire. The oldest girl stared at him with a mixture of relief and wariness, still clutching her pathetic torch. The boy was clearly sick, his face flushed with fever. And the little one? Josh had lived alone in these mountains for 8 years, ever since cholera had taken his wife Sarah and their infant son. He'd chosen isolation, built walls around his heart higher than the peaks themselves. He didn't want complications. He didn't want to care about anyone ever again. "Mister," Lucy's voice cracked as she spoke. "Please, my brother, he's hurt bad. And Emma, she won't wake up properly." Josh approached slowly, his boots crunching in the snow. Up close, he could see the children were in worse shape than he'd initially thought. The boy's arm was clearly broken and infected. The little girl's breathing was shallow, her skin waxy and pale. They were all severely malnourished and suffering from exposure. "How long you been out here?" he asked gruffly, kneeling beside them. "For days," Lucy whispered. "Our parents, they died in the storm." The wagon crashed. Josh's jaw tightened. He'd seen the wreckage 2 days ago while checking his trap lines, had assumed everyone was dead. He should have looked more carefully. These children had been suffering while he'd been warm in his cabin, nursing his whiskey and his self-pity. "Can you carry your sister?" he asked Lucy, already lifting Samuel into his arms. The boy was burning up, delirious with fever. "Yes, sir," Lucy said, though Josh could see she was barely strong enough to stand herself. "My cabin's a mile north. We need to move fast." As they trudged through the snow, Emma stirred in Lucy's arms and opened her eyes. When she saw Josh's rugged profile silhouetted against the starlit sky, she whispered in a voice like wind chimes, "Are you an angel?" "Mama said angels would come when we needed them most." Josh's step faltered. Those words hit him like a physical blow, reminding him of his own son's voice, of bedtime prayers and innocent faith. "No, little one," he said roughly. "I'm just a man." "You saved us," Emma said with the simple certainty of a child. "That makes you our mountain angel." The cabin appeared through the trees like a beacon of hope, solid log walls, smoke curling from the chimney, warm yellow light spilling from the windows. Josh had built it with his own hands, intending it to be a home for his family. Instead, it had become his prison, a place where he'd hidden from the world and from his own broken heart. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, casting dancing shadows across handmade furniture and shelves lined with books. Josh laid Samuel on his own bed, then quickly stoked the fire while Lucy settled Emma on the couch. "There's soup on the stove," he said, ladling the hot broth into bowls. "Eat slowly or you'll be sick." As the children ate, Josh examined Samuel's arm by lamplight. The break was bad and infection had set in. Without proper medical attention, the boy could lose the arm, or worse. "The nearest doctor is in Leadville," he said to Lucy. "That's a 2-day ride in good weather. In this snow." "He'll die, won't he?" Lucy's voice was steady but tears streamed down her cheeks. Josh looked at this brave girl who'd kept her siblings alive through sheer force of will, and something inside his chest cracked open. "Not if I can help it," he heard himself say. That night, as the children slept safely for the first time in days, Josh sat by the fire and stared into the flames. He'd told himself he was done caring about anyone, done opening his heart to the possibility of loss. But these 3 orphans had stumbled into his life like a gift from the very God he'd stopped believing in. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the cabin, something had changed. The walls Josh had built around his heart were beginning to crumble, one stone at a time. Dawn broke gray and cold over the mountains, but inside the cabin warmth had returned to more than just the air. Samuel's fever had broken during the night, and while his arm was still badly injured, the immediate danger had passed. Emma sat at the rough-hewn table, her color improved, carefully spooning oatmeal into her mouth while Lucy helped Josh tend to her brother's wounds. "You've got steady hands," Josh observed as Lucy assisted him in cleaning Samuel's arm. "Your mama teach you that?" "She was a nurse before she married Papa," Lucy said softly. "She always said healing was the most important skill a person could have." Josh nodded, impressed by the girl's composure. At 12, she'd already shown more courage and responsibility than most adults he'd known. As he worked, he found himself thinking about practical things, how to get proper medical supplies, where the children would sleep long-term, what they would need for winter clothing. The realization hit him like a cold slap. He was planning for them to stay. "Mr. Josh?" Emma's small voice interrupted his thoughts. She'd finished her breakfast and was now standing beside his chair, her tiny hand resting on his arm. "Are you going to keep us?" The question hung in the air like smoke from the fire. Josh looked down into those innocent blue eyes, so much like his own son's had been, and felt his carefully constructed walls crumble completely. "Emma, honey," Lucy said quickly, "we can't just assume." "It's all right," Josh said, his voice rougher than usual. He knelt down so he was eye level with Emma. "What makes you think I'd want to keep you?" Emma tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness only a child could muster. "Because you have sad eyes like we do. And sad people need each other." Out of the mouths of babes. Josh felt something break open in his chest, a dam of grief and loneliness that had been holding back 8 years of suppressed emotion. "There's an orphanage in Denver," he said carefully, looking at all 3 children. "They'd find you a proper family, people who know how to raise children." "No." The word exploded from Lucy with surprising force. I've heard about those places. They separate families, work the children like slaves. And Samuel and Emma, they're not strong enough for that kind of life. Josh had heard the same stories. The territorial orphanages were overcrowded, underfunded, and often run by people more interested in free labor than child welfare. The thought of these three being split up, of Emma's light being extinguished in some grim institution, made his stomach turn. Besides, Samuel spoke up from the bed, his voice weak but determined, we don't want another family. We want to stay with you. You don't know me, Josh said, though his protest sounded hollow even to his own ears. I'm not good with children. I live alone for a reason. You saved us, Lucy said simply. You could have left us in the woods but you didn't. You brought us home. Home. The word hit Josh like a physical blow. This cabin hadn't felt like a home in 8 years. It had been a hiding place, a tomb for his memories. But looking at these children, Lucy's fierce protectiveness, Samuel's quiet courage, Emma's unshakable faith, he realized something had shifted. If you stayed, he said slowly, it wouldn't be easy. This is hard country. Winters are brutal and the nearest neighbors are 20 miles away. You'd have to work, all of you. And I'm not. I'm not the kind of man who's good with words or feelings. We're not afraid of work, Lucy said. And we don't need fancy words. We just need someone who won't give up on us. Josh stood and walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered peaks that had been his only companions for so long. In the glass, he could see the reflection of the children behind him, 3 small figures who had somehow managed to find their way through a blizzard and into his heart. He thought of Sarah, of the dreams they'd shared for their family. She would have loved these children, would have opened her arms to them without hesitation. Maybe this was her way of reaching across the divide between life and death, of giving him a second chance at the happiness he'd thrown away. Turning back to face them, Josh saw 3 pairs of eyes watching him with a mixture of hope and fear. They'd lost everything, parents, home, security, and now they were asking him to be their anchor in a world that had shown them nothing but cruelty. All right, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You can stay. Emma launched herself into his arms with a squeal of joy, and for the first time in 8 years, Josh felt tears on his cheeks. Lucy smiled through her own tears, and even Samuel managed a weak grin from the bed. But I need you to understand something, Josh said, his arms tightening around Emma as he looked at Lucy and Samuel. If you're going to be my family, then I'm going to protect you with everything I have. That's a promise I make to you right here, right now. No matter what comes, no matter who tries to take you away, I will fight for you. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Lucy whispered. We understand, Papa Josh, Emma said, the title coming as naturally as breathing. Papa Josh. The words settled into his heart like seeds in fertile soil, and for the first time since Sarah's death, Joshua Ironheart allowed himself to believe in tomorrow. Outside, the wind had stopped howling, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of gold and rose. It was going to be a beautiful day. 6 months later, the Ironheart cabin had transformed from a hermit's refuge into a true home. Wildflowers that Emma had planted bloomed in neat rows beside the front porch, their bright colors a stark contrast to the rugged mountain landscape. Lucy had sewn curtains for the windows from fabric Josh had bought on a rare trip to town, and Samuel, his arm now healed and strong, had helped Josh build additional furniture and expand the cabin with an extra room. The morning sun streamed through those cheerful curtains as the family gathered around the breakfast table, a scene that would have been unimaginable just months before. Josh, clean-shaven and wearing a shirt Lucy had mended, looked 10 years younger. The permanent furrow of grief between his brows had softened, replaced by laugh lines that deepened each time Emma told one of her elaborate stories about the woodland creatures she'd befriended. Papa Josh, Emma announced, carefully cutting her pancakes into perfect squares, Mrs. Rabbit told me her babies are learning to hop today. Can we go watch them after chores? Mrs. Rabbit told you that, did she? Josh asked with mock seriousness, though his eyes twinkled with amusement. And what did Mr. Squirrel have to say about it? He's too busy gathering nuts to gossip, Emma replied with the gravity of a 5-year-old discussing matters of great importance. Lucy laughed as she served more pancakes, the sound light and musical. At 13 now, she'd grown taller and stronger, her auburn hair gleaming with health. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by the natural confidence of a girl who knew she was loved and protected. Samuel, now 10, had shot up several inches and filled out considerably. His broken arm had healed perfectly, and he'd become Josh's shadow, learning everything the mountain man could teach him about hunting, tracking, and surviving in the wilderness. More importantly, he'd learned to smile again. Something Josh had thought might be lost forever after that terrible night in the snow. After chores, Josh said, ruffling Emma's hair, we'll all go see Mrs. Rabbit's babies. But first, Samuel and I need to check the trap lines, and Lucy needs to finish that reading lesson. Josh had been amazed to discover that all three children could read and write, thanks to their mother's dedication to their education. He'd made it his mission to continue their learning, ordering books from Denver and spending evenings by the fire helping with lessons. In return, they taught him things he'd forgotten he'd ever known: how to laugh at silly jokes, how to find wonder in everyday miracles, how to love without fear. As they finished breakfast, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Josh's expression grew serious as he moved to the window. Visitors were rare in these mountains, and unexpected ones often meant trouble. Stay inside, he told the children, reaching for his rifle. But as the riders came into view, he relaxed slightly. It was Sheriff Tom Bradley from Leadville, accompanied by a well-dressed woman Josh didn't recognize. Josh Ironheart. Sheriff Bradley called out as he dismounted. Good to see you, old friend. This here's Mrs. Abigail Thornton from the Territorial Children's Services. Josh's blood ran cold. He stepped onto the porch, positioning himself between the visitors and his family. Sheriff. Ma'am. What brings you up the mountain? Mrs. Thornton, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, consulted a folder in her hands. Mr. Ironheart, we've received reports that you're harboring 3 orphan children without proper legal guardianship. I'm here to assess the situation and, if necessary, transport the children to appropriate facilities. These children are my family, Josh said, his voice deadly quiet. They're not going anywhere. Sir, I understand you may have grown attached, but these children need proper schooling, medical care, and socialization with other children. A single man living in isolation is hardly equipped to. Lucy, Samuel, Emma, Josh called without taking his eyes off Mrs. Thornton. Come out here, please. The 3 children emerged from the cabin, instinctively moving to stand beside Josh. Emma slipped her small hand into his, while Lucy and Samuel flanked him protectively. Mrs. Thornton's expression softened slightly as she took in their appearance. The children were clearly healthy, well-fed, and properly clothed. Their faces glowed with the confidence of children who knew they were loved. Children, she said gently, I'm here to help you. You don't have to stay here if you don't want to. There are nice families in Denver who would love to adopt you, give you proper homes with mothers and fathers. We have a father, Lucy said firmly. And this is our proper home. Papa Josh promised to protect us, Emma added, squeezing his hand tighter. And he keeps his promises. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward. Abigail, I've known Josh for 15 years. He's a good man. And look at these children. Have you ever seen orphans who looked happier or healthier? Mrs. Thornton studied the family for a long moment. She'd seen hundreds of orphan children in her career, and she knew the signs of neglect, abuse, and unhappiness. These children showed none of those signs. Instead, they radiated the security that came from being truly loved. Mr. Ironheart, she said finally, if you're serious about keeping these children, you'll need to make it legal. Adoption papers, proper documentation. And they'll need regular schooling. I can teach them, Josh said. I've got books and Lucy's already reading at a high school level. And medical care? Doc Peterson in Leadville has already seen Samuel's arm. He says I did a fine job setting it. Mrs. Thornton nodded slowly. I'll need to file a report, but I think we can work something out. The territorial government prefers to keep families together when possible, especially when the children are clearly thriving. As the officials prepared to leave, Sheriff Bradley pulled Josh aside. You've changed, old friend. Sarah would be proud of what you've built here. Josh looked back at his children, and they were his children now in every way that mattered, and felt his heart swell with a happiness he'd thought was lost forever. She sent them to me, he said quietly. I'm sure of it. That evening, as the family sat around the fire, Emma curled up in Josh's lap while Lucy read aloud from Little Women, and Samuel whittled a wooden horse. Josh marveled at the strange turns life could take. 6 months ago he'd been a broken man hiding from the world and from his own heart. Now he was a father again, protector of 3 precious souls who taught him that love wasn't something to be feared, it was something to be celebrated. Outside, the mountain wind sang through the pines, but inside the cabin, all was warmth and light and the gentle sounds of a family at peace. The storm that had taken so much had also given them everything they needed, each other. As Emma drifted off to sleep in his arms, Josh whispered the promise he'd made 6 months ago and would make every day for the rest of his life. I'll protect you with everything I have. Always. And in the dancing firelight, surrounded by the laughter and love of his chosen family, Joshua Ironheart finally understood that sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in what we seek, but in what finds us when we need it most. The mountain angel had indeed come when they needed him most, not from heaven, but from the depths of his own wounded heart, ready to love again.